Thank you, Stephen. I'm honored to be here today. I'll admit I sit there and I'm a little bit blown away because logistics in the software business are so different than what I've learned this morning. Well, we don't even ship CDs anymore. We typically just FTP something, or on occasion we email. Things I guess couldn't be more different in my mind. However, to Kim's discussion that just happened, it's a really rapidly changing business for us in the automotive software side as well. And I'd love to share with you some of the things that are happening on our side of the business, because I think some of it will be interesting for you guys, and I hope I can blow your minds a little bit as well. Do I have the clicker?
I'm sorry.
I should have asked Steve for the clicker before.
Should have given it to you.
All right. We've spent the morning talking about issues facing our industry, but from the software side of the house, it really looks a little bit different. And let me try and talk about that for you. The advent of the smartphone has really turned our business on its edge. When I traditionally do a bit of a talk on how things have changed in software, I show that first nav system, ETAC. Do you guys remember it? It was actually built by a couple of guys from Atari. I was going to say dudes, but I know this is the wrong audience. It's a lot of ties. And the smartphone has really changed things. Infotainment, telematics, rear seat entertainment, digital instrument clusters, the sensor fusion of all kinds of different things coming together is a huge, huge undertaking in the software business right now. Apps are the rage. I was at an OEM in Europe last week, and they were quite animated with me. Some of you have probably been in these meetings, but in this case, he was yelling at me because he said, "Derek, I need Facebook. I need it now." And I thought to myself, you gotta be kidding me. You need Facebook in the car now. And it's that important that we're actually all here trying to figure out how we're gonna make that happen for them, for a production program that actually is rolling off this fall. This breeds a ton of hard problems in my mind, and probably in yours too, right? We've all seen the discussion about distraction. One of the things that we have to do better as an industry, especially from a software perspective, is we've got to make this simpler. It's just got to happen. Making it so that it's a truly seamless experience in the car as people bring in things to the car that they just expect to work. And to Steve's point earlier, my kids wonder why my car kind of sucks from an electronics perspective. I'm sorry, but it's true. Do you guys have the same experience? They're young enough that they don't have smartphones yet, but they play with mine. They use my wife's. They have tablets, and they see what happens in the car, and they're thinking to themselves, "There's like a disconnect here." And I want to talk to you a little bit about that disconnect. The other piece that you see on this slide is brand. One of the things that I'm incredibly concerned about is that all of the consumer electronics influences really changes the game in terms of how brand plays a role. That whole user experience in the car, something that automakers are very proud of. Are we really going to facilitate an environment in the car where we just let the smartphone take over and everything else is kind of the same? I'm not certain that's the right answer. And I'd love feedback from all of you here today as well. All right, so let's talk about a couple of key things, right? Connectivity. Connectivity is driving unbelievable innovation in the automotive market. And it's not just about entertainment functionality in the car. It's about crowdsourcing sensor data from the car. It's about sharing that with other cars. It's about ubiquity in terms of how cars will communicate with the cloud and how your devices will communicate with the car, whether you're in the car or outside of the car or whatever. This is a trend that is something that we've just had to embrace. And in fact, in certain automakers, we've had to do it already to make sure that they were leading in the brand wars where they thought this was a true differentiator. Up-to-date electronics. The trend in the a couple of years ago even was that you would get a spec that would say it has to do this, and we're using these bits of silicon, and here's the board, and make it happen. Can't happen anymore. It's just not possible. Now, you need to actually think about the architecture. It was funny, we had this discussion about talking about the architecture from a tool perspective. It's the same thing in the software business. You really, really have to think about the architecture holistically and then choose the components that are actually going to be able to enable that experience that the automaker is trying to achieve. It's something that the tier ones are struggling with. It's something that we're supporting that community with to the best of our ability. But the days where you actually chose the hardware before the software, they're over, because the hardware really dictates what the software can and can't achieve going forward. And it's got to be connected, and it has to be live and real and dynamic and continue to be fresh throughout the ownership experience in the car. The other thing is personalization. There's a whole generation of people that are about me and making things more about myself. We know some, right? It's going to happen in the car too. It's a demand that's happening from the OEM community towards us as a software manufacturer like never, ever before. And it's not just QNX saying these things. I wanted to put some proof points up there for you. I was not sure if this is relevant to this audience or not. It's my first time at this event, but most industry insiders, some of which I talk to on a regular basis, they're telling us about the fact that we have to adapt to this new consumer. And they're spending time with OEMs, and OEMs are spending time trying to figure out how this makes happen. So I've put a couple of examples there about how vehicle connectivity, personalization, social influences, all because of what's happening in consumer electronics and mobility, are really affecting that user experience in the car. The other thing is, with all of the distraction discussions, we still have automakers, and I don't expect it to change, so maybe the way I'm phrasing it is actually really wrong. We have automakers demanding of us that we can provide a productive environment in car. Make that hands-free system better, Derek. Make it so that they can have, email in the car, so that the calendar that's in their smartphone actually just seamlessly integrates with their navigation system, and the address that they're going to actually populates the nav system. All of these things have to work together in a way that, they haven't been before. They were discrete, but now they're all combined. And the reality is, it's not just about working with your BlackBerry or iPhone. It's got to work with 100 different phones. And I'll tell you, that's a hard problem because they all work a little differently. And the fragmentation in that business is just ridiculous. But we're trying, and I think we have a bunch of different ideas on how to solve it. So let's look at this together, right? I talk a lot about disposable technology. Applications right now, they last typically a few weeks. If you really have an amazing application, you're lucky if you get a bunch of months out of it on a smartphone app store. Yeah, there's a few exceptions, but it's the general rule. Smartphones, feature phones, consumer electronics. I don't know when they became disposable. I remember I had that Motorola StarTAC. Did you guys have that? I felt so cool, flipped that thing open, right? I had that for like 2 years. Felt cool the whole 2 years. These days, right? If you don't have a new phone every 9 months, it's amazing the turnover that's actually happening in that business. But what's happening is we're driving a certain behavior in the consumer industry, and the demands of what they want in vehicle is driven because of their experience. But I would suggest that the time frame around automotive vehicle electronics is significantly different, and we can't just throw it away every 9 months, get something new. We need to create an architecture that has the longevity for the basis of what that car is expected to last. And it's very interesting to someone like myself as an engineer to actually experience how different OEMs look at this differently. But as I said before, keeping the car fresh because it's connected, because of the architecture that's been put forward in automotive, is critical to our business going forward. All right, driver distraction. My goodness, this is probably something that I never would have imagined spending as much time on just a few short years ago. But recently I was at the CTIA conference, which is the big mobility conference in North America, and I was asked by NHTSA to actually talk a little bit about what's happening in automotive around driver distraction. I put that big number in the bottom there because Virginia Tech, one of the leading academic institutions that's researching distraction in the world, has come up with some very, very interesting numbers that if you're using a phone in the car, you're 23.2 times more likely to smash into something. That's astounding. How many of us use our phones in the car? Maybe me. I'm just saying, How many of these cars in the room have hands-free systems? Well, they all do. It's an option on that one. But the reality is, how many of us in this room have seen people driving these cars and they're holding the phone or they're writing something? It happens every single day. Every single day. And the reason is that actually a lot of people give up trying to figure out how to make their phone work with the car. They just give up. They're like, I don't want to do it. Pairing, I have to put a number in, listening, not pairing, trying again, forget it. You've been there, right? I'll admit to you, I sit at the Bluetooth SIG sometimes and I say to those guys, man, we made it like the most complex standard in the world. Nobody can figure it out. I know it's good job protection, but beyond that, it's a little hard to figure out. And it's reality. We have to, as a software company, we've got to come up with unique ways to make this dirt simple for people so they don't have to think about it. And that's what's going to be able to bring that number down. Because I believe that we're not going to actually change consumer behavior. We're not going to actually have this big kumbaya moment and everybody's going to leave their phone at home when they get in the car. I don't think it's going to happen. What we need to do, though, is we need to actually make something that just makes it work for them. And makes it work in a way that they're not actually trying to figure something else out. You can leave your phone in your purse, you can leave it on your hip. It never actually has to be touched when you're in the car. And there's a few automakers that I've seen that are doing some amazingly cool things that I think are really going to change the game in this space. But whether or not they're early enough to the game to make an impact when governments are legislating, right? Steve and I talked about this before, potentially how things might change in automotive electronics. It's an interesting time to be a part of this.